and justice. And as a first target, we say that registers and geospatial databases include informal constructions and ownership rights to foster greater socioeconomic integration. And there, well, I'm sorry. Yeah, I missed that. Yeah, I missed the first slide. So the goal is that the informal settlements are formalized and brought into formal markets in a just, efficient, and sustainable manner, allowing for broad socioeconomic progress, justice, and the empowerment of the people. And we have to understand here that there is a greatly extended informality in legal informality there in the informal settlements. And this means that there is a lack of titles and property registration. And exactly this means that people lack of legal empowerment. They lack of access to credit, but also legal empowerment against evictions, which is very important during the COVID period. And also there is a lack of geospatial data. Of course, there are projects for property registration. Of course, there are some data sets there, but they are not updated. And the informal constructions are not integrated always. In some cases, they are. There is a preparation for the formalization projects in several countries. So there are some geospatial data available. There are geospatial data available in certain offices, maybe in the constructors, maybe in the land registries. So we need to work on that. And residents also work in the informal sector, as already mentioned. So this is a negative impact on GDP and risk and real estate values and tax revenue. Although from my experience, unfortunately, these people there, the residents of informal settlement, they are in several times overtaxed, and maybe also because some residents there, they cannot afford to pay taxes, then taxes are increased, and those that they pay even more and more, which is unfair. And there is a need for formalization titles in an inclusive way and inclusive policies. So the target one, as I said, it's about registers and geospatial databases, and the actions mentioned are to identify the current coverage and the quality and scope of the available geospatial sources, and of course to map and include informal buildings in the geospatial database, and to consider all new technology and methodology and VGI and crowdsources and smart applications and mobile services and low cost methods. To coordinate the local community, enable and engage the local community. Of course, here we may need the contribution of experts from the formal sector, how to coordinate the local community, how to organize the mapping volunteers, how to train them, how to identify the team leaders, how to judge their skills and their commitment, and how to select the tools, open source tools, and appropriate base maps and validation methods. I included some of the sources here that we may reference, and also to supplement existing demographic information together with the collection of the information needed for formalization. We can also include information necessary. It is already mentioned during this workshop about the age distributions, the disabilities, the gender issues, the health issues, some maybe are personal data, but they are very important for the recovery plan against COVID. Now, the second target is informal constructions are formalized in a fair, efficient, transparent, and inclusive manner, empowering residents. supporting social and economic inclusivity, and better pandemic responses. So actually what we say here is all mentioned in the previous publication, very newly published, the guidelines, which is a quite detailed publication document and useful. So here, complementary, we add the response to COVID. And of course, we have to identify the extent of informal and unregistered constructions and parcels, and then to organize the political will, to analyze, to classify, to see the types, the extent, the size, and all that, to analyze the existing informality and to decide what can be formalized and what cannot be formalized, to prepare the framework altogether, zones or types of categories of buildings that are eligible for formalization, protected areas, to identify the necessary legal actions, the procedures for title provision and title registration, monitoring procedures, to identify the fees and institutions that should be involved. There is a lot of information in the guidelines. And of course, to prepare the legal framework and carry out the fit for purpose formalization process. I don't go into more details on that because we have the publication. Now, the third target is that legal rights and justice systems are efficient and adequate, that they support sustainable development and foster integration of labor and land markets and be responsive to capital markets, equitable and inclusive, etc. So the actions here are that we need to identify and review the existing legal structures and see if there are any obstacles, to review the procedures, the fees, the time, the costs, the fairness, if they are inclusive, if they are supported, respecting human rights, and if they are flexible, and then to determine the legal problems that may hinder formalization and integration, and then draft the legal strategy to bridge any gaps and to support title provision, and engage again the local community, the local leaders, and everyone, the stakeholders, to support this legal reform and to build the political will and to raise awareness among the people for the legal changes. This is very important, and to understand and prepare for any additional legal issues and any criminal challenges that may be anticipated that they will arise due to lockdowns and partial or full closures, and see how we will deal with these issues, and to provide titles to ensure maintenance of geospatial data, to allow for structural improvements. Here it is very important. We suggest that fees and penalties may be removed from the formalization and may be replaced with incentives for people, both for the private sector and for the owners, the occupants of informal constructions, to make improvements, more green, more nature-based solutions for the neighborhoods, and improvements, green improvements, energy improvements for the constructions. So this was mainly about policy area 9, and now I will go very quickly to policy area 8, which is involvement of local communities and local action. So the goal here is that local community-based organizations coordinated with the city-level team respond to the pandemic in coordination with government ministries, medical, professional and aid organizations and all kinds. And we understand here that there is a need to raise awareness on matters, raise awareness that is important, and especially for response to COVID, especially to understand, as it is already mentioned here, that people do not want to change, people do not want to believe that there is a risk, a danger, a threat. Local community leaders have a crucial role to play. Either they are religious leaders or whatever, but it is very important because these are trusted people in the local community, and they must understand and they must redesign their approaches and their theories so that they will adopt the science-based plans and communicate this to their people. And the COVID-19 crisis requires, as we said, short-term responses, immediate responses that sometimes contradict to local customs and religious procedures, which is important. And also to try to organize volunteers, and this is there's a lot of experience in the developed countries, and I think also in Asia there is a lot of experience there. We need to work more on that. The target now, the first target here is that social and community groups are formed to respond to pandemic related threats. Engage residents and address the community's very specific needs. So the actions here are to identify the existing trusted community leaders, social and faith-based groups, to understand their approach to safeguarding the community from the pandemic threat, to encourage the creation of local task forces. And also here we need to add also the contribution of the formal sector to that, to identify specific community needs and pandemic-related issues, to identify and create or expand the relevant government ministries that are critical in pandemic health response and community engagement, to develop local community-led specific plans to address possible problems and shortages, to assist and organize the citywide and community-led groups along with government agencies, and address and fund these specific community challenge initiatives, to coordinate these local initiatives with national and international stakeholders. The second target refers to local charities and international NGOs and donors that are coordinated to respond to the pandemic threats and assist in solving community specific challenges. And here the actions are to identify the donors and charities that have an interest in cooperating and assisting for the pandemic response, to engage international donors and NGOs and other stakeholders and bring them together with government agencies. We understand that it is not very easy. They want to work independently, but this will help the major challenge here to recover from COVID. To create a plan to link the variety of NGOs and donors and their resources with local challenges, and to integrate charity and NGO programs with appropriate oversight to minimize corruption and waste and malpractice. Okay, and the third target is community-based information campaigns, provide accurate data to informal settlement residents, disseminating such information in a timely manner, and in detail appropriate to the local pandemic threats. So here the actions are to identify the methods to reach the greatest number of committed informal settlement residents, committed volunteers. Here also we should add the formal and informal, from formal and informal sector, to develop urgent community-specific plans, to assist in raising awareness and coordinate with government agencies, to supply information to local communities and use the appropriate languages, to keep societal and political will strong by focus on consistent science-based problem solving to minimize mistrust and any kind of negative approach to the whole recovery plan. And I think that this is the end of the presentation. I think that more issues can be mentioned here to support the work for choosing volunteers and evaluating their skills and their commitment. But we will go through a second review of the text and we will see how we will improve it. So
thank you,
I will
Chris.
stop sharing now because Stephen also has to.
Yes, Stephen, the floor is yours. I would like to take 1 second to thank the experts for staying with us, even though we are a bit off time-wise. We're about 15 minutes late on our time schedule, and I wanted to thank them for accommodating this. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I did notice that we're already over on this session. I do have 2 pieces to do, so I will be as quick as possible. Hold on. Okay, so don't need to look at that again. Policy area 5 is the last of the 3 policy areas in this section, in session 3. The goal of policy area 5, once again, I'm presenting just the goal and the 3 targets. I did not put all the actions down. The text will have all of that. The goal is to balance stay-at-home recommendations with social and economic realities facing the local, culture, diverse populations, and the vulnerable groups. Essentially, in our first target, we have the cultural and demographic challenges in informal settlements need to be overcome. There's language barriers, there's a variety of, there's probably already tension between the formal and informal community residents, especially when there are either faith-based or faith, race, culture-based language barriers. And the pandemic response has the potential for making those problems worse. So those need to be considered carefully and appropriate responses need to be implemented before these become significant problems as part of the plan. So a study of that needs to be done and once again, the specific actions are in the actual plan. I'm just giving the target. Target 5.2, stigma, bias, prejudice, discrimination, and human rights abuses related to pandemic responses are eradicated. Now, we're not going to get rid of anything, but they need to be at the very least minimized. Or maybe we can eradicate the additional problems that are related to COVID. And really, if you know, in a perfect world, we would get rid of all these problems completely. But I'm not saying that we would succeed in getting rid of them all. So I'm not going overboard as far as that goes. Government's assistance in the protection of human rights during any health crisis is going to be needed. A lot of these problems, especially abuses, tend to go up. Tensions are high, resources are low, so bias, prejudice, discrimination factors when you already have a frustrated population can easily get significantly worse. So a healthy response from government early on and a fairly strong hand to make sure that those problems don't get expanded during a crisis time is key, because it could spiral and snowball out of control and actually get much, much, much worse, and at that point not be within the government's ability to stop. Target 5.3. Low-income residents and vulnerable groups are adequately supported. These are, I think I touched on this before, these groups don't have much in the way of set aside economic or basically money and resources to be able to handle a crisis. So this is a time when government and aid agencies should consider stepping in during peak pandemic periods when their employment situations are which were already fairly fragile, are going to be more fragile, and they don't have they need the necessary support to be able to comply with any stay-at-home or quarantine protocols, because if they don't have that support, they will just violate the protocols and they will spread the virus. So it is in the interest of everyone, as well as human rights, to make sure the vulnerable groups and the low-income residents are not discriminated against and have the support they need so that they can comply and keep the surrounding formal communities and their own informal communities safe. Okay, so enough for policy area 5. I did tell you I was going to talk about cross-sectoral. There was a lot of discussion about this, and I think a lot of interest that that we handle cross-sectoral. So luckily, I already did it. What you're going to see here is a look at all the cross-sectoral themes that you will see throughout all of the actions. Many of the things you'll see here are echoed again and again and again in different targets in different ways, but almost all of them have most of this. And also in the problem-solving process by which I analyzed the issues, and it's that whole snarl of institutional connections and efficiencies and inefficiencies, and how do you tease those, pull the right threads to solve the problem and develop those into actions. This is really almost the problem-solving methodology that was happening in my head to find and pull the right threads in the right order, so that those, and I tried to make the actions in the right order so that they would play out in a logical fashion and you could see them grow action by action. So first step is problem identification. You'll note in the end, it needs to be a real, I capitalized the keywords. This is the diagnosis of the problem. We need to be solving, looking at the cause. At the very least, we need to be understanding the cause and not treating the symptoms, thinking those are the causes. So a realistic understanding of the problem, an accurate one. That way, that when we get to the next stage, the data gathering phase, once again, throughout all the targets and actions in all of the policy areas, GIS mapping, demographics, medical research, scientific data, cultural and local realities, socioeconomics. The output from the data gathering side is a broad set of comprehensive data. So diagnose the problem, gather a broad set of data, and then move to the strategy. The outcome, you need to plan within your available resources, but think about how to expand your resources, because then you can have new solutions. You have to take into account socio-political realities. There's no way around it. This is, our communities are built on people. And people have psychological limitations. We have timetables for interventions that we need to understand. They need to be realistic, because unrealistic timetables just is another recipe for failure. Communication and consensus gathering tools at the appropriate levels, and a lot of them is going to be needed. And once again, focus on causes and not on the symptoms whenever possible. The outcome from this section is a flexible strategy, because mistakes are going to be made and you're going to have to adjust. And as time goes on, the right solution is going to change. So this is the last slide, by the way. Communication, obtaining and retaining political and social will. Both, communicate, none of that is easy. Communicating and being effective about it, obtaining political and social will to begin with, and keeping it when the fatigue sets in, all are going to be big challenges. And you need flexible messaging. I'm not going to read that whole thing there. Let me see if there's anything that jumps out at me that really needs to be highlighted. Solutions will often clash with what people desire, expect, and feel they deserve. They're going to test our faith. They can feed mistrust, greed, selfishness, and a host of negative emotions. People are going to use this to derail the process for their own political or economic ends sometimes. We need to stay on point. We need flexible messaging, and we need to be able to adapt to a wide variety of audiences and as time goes on. We don't need to convince everybody, but we need to convince most people. We need to keep on point, and that needs at least a consensus. Lastly, balanced, flexible adaptation to changing circumstances. This definitely includes sustaining political will and hopefully resources and funding too. Resources and funding is going to dry up in certain areas, and we need to be able to find more of it as time goes on. But that's even more true of getting will. The will of the people is going to wax and wane. A strong leadership will be so key in getting this to all work. And a lot of that is luck. Who's the leader at the helm when this challenge comes along? In the United States, we had Trump at the helm. We all saw how that played out. There are other people have had different leaders, and they've had different outcomes. So leadership is going to be very, very key. Idealism needs to be tempered with results-oriented pragmatism if success is to be achieved. So I'm a very results-oriented, pragmatic person, and that I think is the best way to get successful results and achieve what we're after. So thank you very much, and I'll leave it at that. I apologize if we went over.
Thank you, Stephen.